Startling fact. Some days Ukraine flies nearly 7,000 drones in a single day, a number that rewrites modern warfare. As Zelenskyy put it, we will discuss territories directly with Putin. Security guarantees will be worked out with our partners. Yesterday's closed-door meeting changed the game. Yesterday, Zelenskyy sat down with President Trump and top European leaders, an unexpected trio that immediately raised global stakes, closed doors, high tensions, and a single line that flipped the script. For 4 years the conflict has defined Europe's security calculus, and this meeting promised a possible pathway out. But it was unexpected because it forced Putin's narrative into a new frame: legitimacy, negotiation, and public admissions. I'm Sam. Let's unpack exactly what happened, why it matters, and how Zelenskyy turned the tables. This is straight from the old KGB playbook, a strategy of political subversion. Putin presented a so-called peace deal demanding Ukraine cede the Donbas and recognize Crimea as Russian. This wasn't a genuine offer, it was a carefully constructed trap. The Kremlin knew no sovereign nation could accept sacrificing millions of citizens and validating aggression. The goal was never peace, but to create a pretext. He knew Zelenskyy would refuse. The rejection was the point. Immediately, Russian state media went into overdrive with a deceptive message. We offered peace, but Kyiv chose war. This narrative was designed to fracture Western unity, feeding the arguments of isolationists and painting Zelenskyy not as a defender but as an obstacle to peace. The ultimate goal? Sever Ukraine's lifeline of Western weapons and support. Without it, Russia gains the decisive advantage. The stakes are monumental, extending far beyond Ukraine's borders. A Russian victory would redraw Europe's security map, placing a revanchist power on NATO's doorstep. It would also grant Moscow greater control over global energy and food supplies, a powerful lever for future blackmail. But Russia has an Achilles heel. Its war effort is bankrolled by hydrocarbon sales, the economic engine of the invasion. Disrupting this flow of petrodollars through sanctions and price caps is paramount. Because in modern warfare, victory isn't just about tactics, it's fueled by money. A war machine without cash grinds to a halt. This placed President Zelenskyy in a precarious position. He had to lead a nation in an existential war on the ground while simultaneously fighting a relentless information war on the global stage, countering the Kremlin's campaign to paint him as illegitimate and isolate his country. Inside the tense quiet of the conference room, the stakes couldn't have been higher. On the surface, the agenda seemed deceptively simple. Hammer out robust security guarantees for Ukraine and establish a roadmap for direct talks between Zelenskyy and Putin. This was the endgame everyone claimed to want. But for months, progress had been stalled, mired in procedural arguments. The world was watching, wondering if this was a genuine breakthrough. But President Zelenskyy had authorized a daring tactical shift. His team didn't just show up to negotiate, they came to reframe the entire process. With a single, decisive move, they cleaved the negotiations into two distinct parallel tracks. The first security guarantees would be formalized with international partners, the US, the UK, and European powers. These would be concrete, legally binding agreements. The second track, the contentious issues of territory and sovereignty, was explicitly reserved for one forum only, a face-to-face meeting between Zelenskyy and Putin. The message was unequivocal. Ukraine's long-term security is a matter for its allies, but the fate of its land is a conversation the Kremlin must have with its sovereign counterpart. This brilliant maneuver immediately forced Vladimir Putin into a public and deeply uncomfortable dilemma. Option 1, agree to meet Zelenskyy as an equal, which would implicitly abandon years of Kremlin propaganda that painted Ukraine as a fake country, and its leadership as an illegitimate junta. A handshake would shatter the premise of his war. Option 2, refuse the meeting. This would expose his talk of readiness for dialogue as a sham, revealing him as the primary obstacle to peace. For a leader whose political legitimacy is built on a mythical narrative about Russia's dominion over Ukraine, either choice was excruciating. It was a masterclass in diplomatic boxing. In the aftermath, Ukraine's partners moved to solidify the opening. A NATO briefing noted that intervention from former President Trump had helped break the logjam, securing a commitment from Putin to at least consider a presidential meeting. Trump himself followed up with a public statement, confirming plans for a Putin-Zelenskyy summit and a later trilateral meeting including the United States. But just as momentum seemed to build, Moscow deployed its signature tactic. While their negotiators agreed to a framework in private, the Kremlin's public response was a torrent of obfuscation. official statements suddenly spoke only of meetings between delegations, a classic diplomatic downgrade. This is a well-worn page from the Kremlin's playbook: concede behind closed doors, then publicly deny or reinterpret the agreement to sow confusion and stall for time. Every week of delay is a strategic victory for Russia, offering more time to rearm, fortify defenses, and hope that Western resolve fractures. But Ukraine wasn't just negotiating with words. Its most powerful leverage was being forged in workshops and launched from the front lines. A massive, decentralized ecosystem of domestic drone production has become the engine of Ukraine's resistance. We're talking about thousands of cheap FPV drones that can hunt individual tanks and sophisticated long-range UAVs striking deep inside Russia. These attacks have crippled major oil refineries, hitting the core of Russia's war economy. At sea, indigenously developed maritime drones have challenged the dominance of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. This battlefield innovation is paired with bold economic statecraft. To secure ironclad U.S. guarantees, Zelensky's government reportedly floated a staggering proposal: a $100 billion purchase of American weapons, financed by European partners. This reframes the conversation. It's not a plea for aid, but a massive, mutually beneficial defense contract. As General David Petraeus told us on our podcast, this is the new face of war. Unmanned systems produced on a massive scale are rewriting military doctrine. For Ukraine, these drones are more than just weapons. They are the ultimate strategic leverage, giving weight to their words at the negotiating table. Until this point, negotiations were controlled by the Kremlin's narrative that Ukraine's leadership was illegitimate. The pivotal moment came when Zelensky shattered that facade, making the negotiation structure public in the room. This act of high-stakes transparency was a direct challenge, forcing Putin to either engage with the proposal or publicly contradict his own story. He said, "We can discuss territorial concessions with Putin directly. Security guarantees will be worked out with our partners." This two-pronged proposal was brilliant. By offering to discuss territory directly with Putin, he acknowledged him as the ultimate decision-maker. Simultaneously, by delegating security guarantees to partners, he formally invited the West to the table to build a NATO-like shield around Ukraine. This put the Kremlin in an immediate bind. Russian state media had long pushed the narrative that Zelensky was an illegitimate puppet. Now, Putin faced a political trap. Meeting Zelensky would mean implicitly acknowledging his legitimacy, admitting the invasion's pretext was a lie. Refusing the meeting would expose his information campaign as a sham and paint him as the obstacle to peace. Either way, Zelensky won a major tactical victory. In diplomacy, controlling the narrative is paramount. He had masterfully shifted the burden of explanation from Kiev to Moscow. It was no longer about Ukraine proving its willingness to talk, it was now about Russia justifying its refusal. The second part of the proposal immediately bore fruit. European leaders publicly backed coordination on security guarantees. Crucially, the language discussed was akin to Article 5, the cornerstone of the NATO alliance. The mere discussion of such a powerful commitment was a monumental step. Moscow pushed back publicly, calling the move a PR stunt. But the denials fell flat. The meeting's record, witnessed by multiple delegations, and the coordinated response from allies completely undercut Moscow's position. For Ukraine, the gains were immediate: solidified international backing, the promise of security pledges, and new bargaining power. They were no longer just defending, they were setting the agenda. By turning a private negotiation into a public referendum on Putin's intentions, Zelensky didn't just join the game, he changed its rules. That is how Zelensky flipped the table. In short, this forces Putin into public choices, secures concrete allied guarantees, and raises Ukraine's negotiating leverage. If formalized, these guarantees could reshape Ukraine-West relations and change how future settlements are structured. But much depends on follow-through, diplomacy, sanctions, and continued support. What do you think? Did Zelensky just outmaneuver Putin? Comment below and tell us your take. If you like this breakdown, check our previous video on modern diplomacy and hit subscribe for daily analysis. Thanks for watching.